reason you have your hand on your weapon? I'm putting groceries in my car.
You match the description of someone reported stealing out here. I'm going to need ID now.
I understand you're doing your job, but you're speaking to Judge Elaine Carter, United States District Court. This is my vehicle, and those are my bags. Ma'am, I don't care who you think you are. Hand me your license. You should care, because right...
The parking lot security cameras recorded everything. Every second, every word, every decision that would come back to haunt the officer involved. And Officer Damon Rusk had absolutely no idea that the woman he was detaining had spent more than 2 decades on the federal bench, ruling on cases involving police misconduct, civil rights violations, and Fourth Amendment abuses. The woman standing beside the black sedan wasn't panicking, arguing, or resisting. She was Judge Elaine Carter, known for sentencing corrupt officers and writing legal opinions that reshaped policy in 3 states. And now, she was about to become the plaintiff in a lawsuit that would cost the city $870,000 and end a career that should never have made it this far. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Officer Damon Rusk crossed the parking lot with the same posture that had earned him a reputation inside the department. Shoulders tight, jaw set, and his hand resting on the grip of his holstered firearm. It was a habit he rarely broke. Over the past 8 years, Internal Affairs had reviewed more than a few complaints tied to his stops. Most were dismissed for lack of clear evidence, but the pattern was well known among his peers. Quick escalations, vague justifications, and disproportionate stops involving black motorists. Supervisors noted his behavior, but nothing had ever been caught clearly enough on video to result in meaningful consequences. Today would be different. Rusk's eyes locked onto a woman loading several shopping bags into the trunk of a black sedan. Nothing unusual. No broken glass, no frantic behavior, just an older woman placing items in her car, the same way hundreds of shoppers had done that afternoon. But a vague, suspicious person call had come through moments earlier. No details, no mention of a crime, just black female near a black vehicle. That was all Rusk needed. He moved faster. "Ma'am, step away from the vehicle and show me some identification, now." The woman straightened slightly, one hand still holding her key fob. Her movements were controlled, measured, calm in a way that irritated officers like Rusk, people who expected confusion or fear. A few spaces away, Mirabel Santos slowed as she approached her own car. Rusk's tone caught her attention immediately. She turned, saw the officer's posture, and without hesitation pulled out her phone and began recording from behind her open door. She didn't know who the woman was, she didn't know what was happening, but she knew what that posture meant. The woman kept her voice neutral. "Is there a problem, officer?" Rusk didn't answer. He shifted to block the open trunk completely, a dominance tactic he'd used hundreds of times. "I said step away from the vehicle and show me some identification, now!" The woman didn't move back. She didn't raise her voice. "On what basis are you detaining me?" she asked. Rusk hated questions like that. They made him feel challenged. "I'm investigating a suspicious person report," he snapped. "What suspicious behavior was reported?" she asked, still steady. He didn't answer because he couldn't. There was none. Mirabel angled her phone, making sure she captured his hand tightening on the holster. The woman lifted the key fob in her hand. "Officer, I'm loading my own car with my own purchases. I have the key right here." Rusk stepped closer. "Ma'am, you need to cooperate." "I am cooperating," she replied. "I'm asking you to explain the legal basis for detaining me." That single sentence was enough to set him off. Rusk measured compliance by silence, not by lawful behavior. The calmer she became, the more tense he grew. "Your ID," he demanded again, voice hardening. She reached slowly into her bag. "I'm retrieving my wallet." Rusk's fingers closed tighter around the grip of his weapon. The security camera overhead rotated slightly, tracking the movement. She handed him her driver's license. He looked at it briefly. "This your vehicle?" "Yes," she said, pressing the lock button on her key fob. The car chirped behind her. She pressed unlock, another chirp. Mirabel captured everything. Rusk should have ended the stop immediately. Everything matched. No crime, no suspicion, no justification to continue. But backing down in public in front of a woman who dared to question him felt like defeat. "You're being uncooperative," he said. "I need to verify this." "Officer," she replied, "there is no legal basis for this detention." He ignored her. "Wait here." "For how long?" "As long as it takes." The woman watched him, her expression unchanged. "You're making a serious mistake." Rusk turned back towards her. "Ma'am, step back." She didn't move. "Am I free to go?" "No," he snapped. Maribel zoomed in again. "What crime are you investigating?" the woman asked. Rusk didn't answer. He didn't have one. Instead, he moved closer, invading her space, a method he used when he felt control slipping. "Step away from the vehicle and do exactly as I say." The parking lot seemed to quiet around them. Shoppers slowed their pace. A few stared openly. The woman inhaled once, then spoke with a clarity that made Rusk pause just long enough for every camera to capture his hesitation. "Officer, I'm a sitting federal judge." Rusk's eyes flicked, confused for half a second, then hardened. "I don't care who you think you are." The moment was recorded from 3 angles. And from that second forward, the situation was no longer something Rusk could undo with authority or attitude. It was now evidence. Officer Damon Rusk stood inches from Judge Elaine Carter, the tension sharp enough that several shoppers stopped pretending not to watch. Her calm declaration, "I'm a sitting federal judge," should have frozen the situation, forced him to reassess, step back, and de-escalate. Instead, he doubled down. "I don't care who you think you are," Rusk repeated, voice louder this time, as if volume could compensate for the mistake he was already making. His hand stayed on his holster, the cameras documenting every second. Elaine kept her hands visible. "My hands are empty. I'm standing still. Your body camera is recording this." "Stop being belligerent," he snapped. "Get back from the vehicle." "I've complied with every lawful instruction," she said, "but you're violating established law and detaining me without reasonable suspicion." Rusk didn't respond. He couldn't, not without admitting she was right. Instead, he raised his radio and stepped back just enough to run her information. From 20 feet away, Mirabel Santos zoomed in, capturing the moment Rusk walked to his patrol car with Elaine's license. Her voice shook slightly as she whispered into her phone. "I'm recording all of this. Yes, he's detaining her for nothing." Elaine stood still beside her sedan, hands clasped carefully in front of her. She watched Rusk through the windshield of his patrol car as he entered her license into the system. He frowned, typing again, then again. Everything came back clean. No warrants, no flags, not even a speeding ticket in the last decade. He should have ended the stop right there. But Rusk stared at the screen, jaw tightening, because stopping now meant admitting he'd escalated for no reason. Shoppers were watching, a woman was recording, and the judge he had dismissed moments earlier was standing perfectly calm, perfectly composed, and perfectly right. He got out of the patrol car and walked back toward her. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to search your vehicle." Elaine blinked slowly, almost disbelieving how far he was willing to push this. "On what basis?" "I have reasonable suspicion that there may be stolen merchandise inside." She glanced at the bags, branded bags from stores in the same mall. "Based on what specific facts?" Rusk hesitated. His silence was all anyone needed. Mirabel whispered into the camera, "He has nothing. Rusk straightened his shoulders. "You're being uncooperative. That gives me suspicion." "No," Elaine said firmly, "the Supreme Court has made it clear that refusing to consent to a search does not create reasonable suspicion. Arizona v. Johnson. You are violating settled law." That name, the case law, the precision, caught him off guard. Rusk's eyes narrowed. "What are you, a lawyer?" Elaine held his stare. "I'm a federal judge." For a moment, everything in the parking lot seemed to pause. The shopping carts, the chatter, the distant hum of traffic. Rusk's mouth twitched, not with respect, but with annoyance. "He needs proof," he said. Elaine slowly reached back into her purse, pulled out her wallet, and removed her federal judiciary credentials. She extended them toward him. The laminated card reflected the sun, the embossed seal unmistakable. He took the credentials with a hand that shook slightly, though he tried hard to hide it. His eyes scanned the card, then flicked to her face. "This could be fake," he muttered, voice weaker now. "Call the courthouse," Elaine said. "The number is public. Ask for Chambers and they will confirm my identity." Mirabelle raised her voice just enough for him to hear. "Officer, I have all of this recorded, every second." Rusk looked from the phone pointed at him to the federal ID in his hand. His confidence wavered, but his pride wouldn't let him step back. Not yet. "Ma'am, step away from the vehicle," he said stiffly. Elaine didn't flinch. "You need to return my identification, apologize, and call your supervisor immediately." Rusk's breathing thickened. "I don't have to do anything." "You do," Elaine replied, "because everything you've done from the moment you approached me is a clear Fourth Amendment violation, and every decision you make in the next 60 seconds will be evidence in a lawsuit." That sentence should have stopped him. It didn't. Rusk reached for his handcuffs. "Turn around. Hands behind your back. You're under arrest." A gasp rippled across the parking lot. Elaine exhaled once, then turned slowly, placing her hands behind her. "For what charge?" she asked. "Interfering with a police investigation." "There is no investigation," she said. "You saw a black woman loading her own car and made assumptions." Mirabelle's voice trembled. "Oh my God, he's arresting her!" Rusk held her arm firmly and began walking her toward the patrol car. People started whispering. One woman said loudly, "She didn't do anything." Another murmured, "Is she serious? He's arresting a judge?" Elaine stayed silent, steady, her head high as she was placed in the back seat. Rusk closed the door, walked around to the driver's side, and sat down heavily. He didn't start the engine right away. He stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, knowing something irreversible had just happened, but refusing to admit it. The cameras recorded that too. He finally shifted the car into drive and pulled out of the parking lot, leaving behind stunned witnesses, a recording that would soon go viral, and an officer whose decision in that moment would define the rest of his career. The patrol car carrying Judge Elaine Carter pulled away from the parking lot, leaving behind a cluster of stunned witnesses and at least 2 fully documented recordings. Officer Damon Rusk kept his eyes fixed on the road ahead, refusing to acknowledge the gravity of what he had just done. Elaine sat motionless in the back seat, hands cuffed, the hard plastic bench pressing into her spine. She wasn't afraid, she was processing. Every moment, every statement, every violation. During the 11-minute drive to the station, neither of them spoke. Rusk gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles pale, trying to convince himself that the arrest was justified. Elaine simply watched the city pass by the window, mentally cataloging everything: the detention, the baseless search request, the racial assumptions, the unlawful arrest. She knew the law. She knew her rights. And she knew this officer had just damaged far more than her afternoon. When the car rolled into the police station's underground intake area, Rusk got out without looking at her. He opened the rear door, avoiding eye contact, and guided her inside. The intake sergeant glanced up briefly, assuming this was like any other booking, until she noticed Elaine's clothes, her posture, and the expression on her face. Something felt off. Elaine was taken to the processing desk, where Officer Carmen Rodriguez, a 12-year veteran, began the standard steps. "Place your belongings on the counter," she said, her tone procedural, not rude. She complied calmly. Wallet, car keys, phone, jewelry. When Rodriguez opened the wallet to catalog it, her eyes locked on to the federal judiciary credentials. She froze, looked at Elaine, looked at the card again, then stared at Officer Rusk. "You brought her in from where?" Rodriguez asked quietly. "Parking lot of Crescent Mall," he said, shrugging. "What was she doing?" "Loading bags into a car." Rodriguez didn't blink. "And the charge?" "Interfering with..." An investigation, Rusk replied, forcing confidence into the words. Rodriguez held up the federal ID slightly. Did you verify this? I think it might be fake, Rusk muttered. But Rodriguez had processed thousands of arrests. She'd seen fake credentials before. Cheap laminates, incorrect seals, bad signatures. This one was nothing like that. It had weight, microprinting, the correct embossing, the hologram of the U.S. courts. She didn't say another word. She walked straight to the watch commander's office. Lieutenant Raymond Cutter, a 21-year veteran, was reviewing reports when she stepped inside. "Lieutenant," she said, closing the door behind her, "you need to see this." He took the federal ID from her hand. He examined it carefully, and his face tightened. "Where is she now?" "Processing." "What are the charges?" "Interfering with an investigation." "What investigation?" Rodriguez hesitated. "There wasn't one." Cutter stood immediately. "Show me." They walked back to processing. Elaine sat calmly in the holding chair, hands folded, expression controlled. Cutter approached her with a level of respect that hadn't been present since Rusk first confronted her. "Judge Carter," Cutter said quietly, "I'm Lieutenant Cutter. I'm aware of the situation, and you're being released immediately." Elaine looked up at him. "What exactly was I being charged with, Lieutenant?" Cutter hesitated. "That is still being reviewed." "I want everything in writing," Elaine said. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. It was the tone of someone who stated facts, not requests. "Yes, ma'am," Cutter said. "Tonight." Rodriguez uncuffed Elaine. Her belongings were returned with care, not haste. Cutter personally escorted her through the station doors and apologized 3 separate times before she stepped outside to call her ride. Elaine arrived home at 6:47 p.m. She sat for a long moment in silence, letting the event settle, not emotionally, but strategically. Then she began making calls. The first was to the chief judge of the federal district court. The second to a longtime friend who specialized in civil rights litigation. The third to the ACLU. By Monday morning, the incident had reached the highest levels of both the federal judiciary and the city's police leadership. But the situation changed even more dramatically when Mirabel Santos uploaded her video. Within hours, the footage had 200,000 views. By the next morning, it hit 3 million. Comment sections flooded with outrage, legal analysis, and disbelief. Users compared timestamps, noted the officer's hand on his weapon, and pointed out Elaine's calm compliance. Local news picked it up, then national outlets, then legal publications. Federal judge arrested for loading her own car. Body cam footage shows clear Fourth Amendment violations. Officer under investigation after viral arrest video. Under that pressure, the police department launched an internal affairs investigation led by investigator Paul Devon, known for being methodical and direct. Devon interviewed Rusk several times. He analyzed each second of body cam and surveillance footage. He reviewed the suspicious person call, which originated from a mall security guard who admitted he thought Elaine looked out of place near expensive vehicles. When Devon pressed him for specifics, any action that could be considered suspicious, the guard had none, only a feeling, a bias. The investigation uncovered a pattern in Rusk's history as well. Black motorists stopped 2.8 times more than average. Searches conducted on them 3.4 times more often. No probable cause for many of those stops. Piece by piece, the department's internal structure began to crack under the weight of the evidence. And Paul Devon's report was nearly complete. Supervisors walked quietly. Officers avoided eye contact. Everyone knew the findings would determine not only the fate of Officer Damon Rusk, but whether the entire department would come under federal scrutiny. When Devon delivered the final report to the chief of police and the city's legal team, the room stayed silent as they read through page after page of documented violations. The evidence was overwhelming. Rusk's stop of Judge Elaine Carter had no legal basis from the moment he approached her. He had ignored clear identification, escalated without cause, used a vague and unverified suspicious person call as justification, and arrested her solely for asserting her constitutional rights. Then came the broader findings. 5 years of traffic stop data showing disproportionate targeting of black motorists, improper searches, and repeated ignore and dismiss patterns by supervisors who should have intervened long before this incident. Devon's conclusion was direct. This was not an isolated mistake. This was symptomatic of deeper systemic issues. Internal Affairs recommended immediate termination. When Rusk was called into the conference room, he tried one last time to justify his actions. He insisted, "I was following the call that came in. She was uncooperative. Devon cut him off calmly. "The video shows she complied. It shows she asked lawful questions. It shows you escalated because you didn't like being challenged." The chief slid the termination letter across the table. He said, "You violated policy, state law, and federal law. You are terminated effective immediately." Rusk stared at the paper, face draining, realizing how final it was. He looked at Devon, then at the chief, but neither man offered anything beyond professional distance. This was a career-ending moment, captured not by rumor or accusation, but by clear video evidence he could not dispute. Outside the department, the fallout was growing. The Department of Justice, already alerted by the viral footage and Devon's preliminary findings, launched a civil rights investigation into the department's stop and search practices. They reviewed Devon's report, obtained additional data, and conducted interviews with officers and residents. The DOJ's findings were released in a 97-page report that laid out the problem clearly. Black motorists in the city were stopped significantly more often than white motorists, even after adjusting for crime rates and population. They were searched more often, detained longer, and faced more escalations despite being less likely to have contraband than their white counterparts. The city agreed to a federal consent decree, which mandated sweeping changes. Mandatory implicit bias and procedural justice training for all officers, a new civilian oversight board with investigative power, a new early warning system to flag officers with problematic patterns, quarterly audits of stop data broken down by race, body-worn cameras required for every uniformed officer, federal monitoring for 3 years. It was the kind of structural reform that departments resist unless forced, but this time the evidence left no room to avoid it. While the city dealt with federal oversight, Elaine Carter was preparing the legal response she had promised. On Wednesday morning, her attorneys filed a 23-page federal lawsuit against Officer Damon Rusk and the city. The lawsuit was detailed, precise, and supported by timestamps from the videos, body camera footage, and witness recordings. She sued for $870,000. The lawsuit alleged unlawful detention, unlawful arrest, violation of Fourth Amendment rights, violation of 14th Amendment equal protection, racial profiling, emotional and reputational harm. The city's attorneys reviewed the footage and Devon's report. Their conclusion was blunt. This is indefensible. There was no legal strategy strong enough to counter what the cameras showed. No jury would side with Rusk. No judge would dismiss the case. The city began settlement discussions immediately. 9 months after the incident, they reached an agreement. $870,000, the full amount Judge Carter demanded. No confidentiality clause, no restrictions on public discussion. When the settlement became public, reporters gathered outside the courthouse for a statement. Elaine Carter stepped to the podium, composed as always. She said, "I didn't pursue this case for money. I pursued it because millions of Americans who look like me do not have the position, the resources, or the legal knowledge to fight back when their rights are violated. I want the footage of this incident to be used as a teaching tool for police departments, for communities, and for anyone who believes accountability should apply equally to those who enforce the law." Then she announced she was donating the entire $870,000 to civil rights organizations focused on police reform and community oversight. The cameras flashed, reporters scrambled to take notes, and across the country, legal commentators began analyzing the case, pointing to it as one of the clearest examples of racial profiling caught fully on video. As for Rusk, he never worked in law enforcement again. Terminated for cause, flagged in federal databases, and widely known because of the viral footage, he found himself unable to secure even private security work. He left the state quietly, avoiding interviews, except for one local segment in which he insisted he had done nothing wrong. When the reporter asked him what specific suspicious behavior Judge Carter had displayed that justified the stop, he couldn't answer. Judge Elaine Carter returned to the federal bench. Colleagues noted she was even more attuned to civil rights issues, even more precise in her rulings, and even more committed to ensuring the Constitution was enforced fairly and consistently. In private conversations with other judges, she made one point repeatedly. "What happened to me wasn't unique. It was just documented." She pushed for the parking lot footage to be used in training, in law schools, and in community forums, because the visibility of injustice is what forces systems to change. And thanks to multiple cameras, a bystander named Mirabel Santos, and a judge who refused to be intimidated, this injustice did not disappear quietly. It became evidence. It became reform. It became accountability.